Hello, my name is Jennifer Weaver, and on behalf of Advancing Evidence-Based Practice, I'd like to welcome you to our July webinar on the Lighthouse Independent Living Model. We'd like to thank Benita Campbell and Bob Meekum for being here with us today, and we look forward to hearing from them. Benita Campbell is currently the Division Director of Lighthouse Youth Services Independent Living and Therapeutic Foster Care Divisions. Lighthouse Youth Services is a private, nonprofit social service agency in Cincinnati, Ohio. The agency operates 7 divisions, which provides a continuum of services to children, youth, and families in 14 different programs. Benita has been at Lighthouse for 21 years, beginning her employment as the agency's first foster parent recruiter. Benita is a licensed social worker in the state of in the state of Ohio, has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in criminal justice with a concentration in juvenile rehabilitation. She has presented both locally and nationally on recruitment and retention of foster parents, moving youth towards self-sufficiency, and other transition issues facing youth aging out of the child welfare system. We also have with us today Bob Meekum. Bob Meekum has served as the Chief Executive Officer of Lighthouse Youth Services since 1978. Under Bob's watch, Lighthouse has grown from a runaway shelter to a $22 million statewide multi-service youth and family service organization. Bob began his career as a live-in counselor in a halfway house for adult felons, then became a probation officer and the Assistant Director of the Butler County Youth Service Bureau. In 1976, Bob joined Lighthouse Youth Services as the director of the Lighthouse Runaway Shelter before his promotion to CEO in 1978. Bob earned his bachelor's in business administration at the University of Cincinnati and his master's in corrections from Xavier University. Thank you so much for being with us here today. During the webinar, if you need technical assistance, you may send me a question via the question pane, and I will respond to your concern. If you have questions about the presentation, send those to me as well, and we'll address them at the appropriate time. We will now turn the time over to Benita.
Thank you, Jen.
Hi, Benita. Thanks so much.
No problem, and welcome everyone else. I am going to talk about the Lighthouse Independent Living Model, and wanted to briefly just start with sort of why we started independent living in 1981. And it was really in response to initially just one gentleman who was preparing to age out of the child welfare system, and had exhausted many different placement options across the city and even the state. And the question became, what will we do next with that particular young man, because all of the other placing agencies had said no to him, or he had already been in their care. So it was actually started as a response to how do we teach this young man to be self-sufficient and to become a productive member of society. And that became to put him in an apartment and help him navigate and manage his life, and provide case management and all of the supports that he needed while he learned to do that still in care. So since that time, we have continued to increase our services to those youth, increase monitoring, and certainly a large part of that has had to do with the growing needs of the youth that we serve, and also the surrounding communities. I do have just a brief agenda today. I won't read it, but these are all of the different facets of our program that I am going to talk about today. So I won't go through every slide word for word, but we'll certainly touch on every item that's in each slide. When we receive referrals, which are primarily from our local children's service agency, Hamilton County is our largest referral source. Obviously, our first issue is, are the youth of age to be in independent living? Typically, they are about 17 to 17 and a half years old. I will tell you that over the past year, we've seen actually a great phenomenon of youth staying in care longer, and have about a third of our program right now is 19 to 20 years of age. That may be in response to the Fostering Connections Act, although Ohio has not totally adopted that act yet. Certainly Hamilton County at least is holding on to those youth longer, and we have more opportunity to help them be successful. We also are looking at what other services are they receiving or will they need outside of Lighthouse, such as MRDD services, which are now called DDS services, Developmental Disability Services, because typically if youth are receiving some of those services, they will ultimately transition as an adult, and we want to make sure that they are a part of that transition planning and that transition is as smooth as possible. We have a delineation of semi-independent living or semi-independent living special needs, and we look at what does that youth need. We do not set the level of care. That is done by our local county agency. But when we're looking at that, what do we need if that youth is needing special services? Is that simply more monitoring? Is that other services within the community, or is that a particular living arrangement? And I'll talk about that in just a minute. How long will they be in care? And in the independent living program, we typically don't like to see a youth in the program any less than 6 months, and even that is really, really difficult to make any real strides in 6 months. So we would like to see youth at least a year in advance of their planned emancipation in order for the youth in our services to be successful. We do consider their criminal history. It typically does not disqualify them from services, but obviously we just want to know any safety or risk factors that we may have as we are integrating that youth into a community where they will, for the most part, be on their own. What are their mental health care needs and diagnoses and any presenting problems that they may have? We obviously hope that they are pretty stable on medication or other services that they are receiving related to their mental health. I will tell you typically what we see is because the majority of these youth have grown up in the child welfare system and have been on medication most of their lives, but that has been given to them by care providers, typically the first thing that happens in independent living is they stop taking that medication. So our staff, which are licensed social workers, really work with them on what is their mental health diagnosis, what are those symptoms, and how can they be stable, and how does medication help that? What we have found is that these youth have been given medication for years, but don't really know why and don't know what it's supposed to do. So part of that is just an education for them in learning how to remain healthy throughout the rest of their life. We do look at their medication and their ability to administer that medication on their own because they are alone by themselves every day. That again is a difficult situation to assess because in other placement settings such as foster care and group homes, staff and foster parents are required to give them that medication. So we actually do a training with the youth and also with the foster parents and group homes that are within Lighthouse to begin to work with youth on taking their own medication and being aware of time and setting schedules and things of that nature. And then we do receive referrals from different county agencies, and often what they provide us and what we need from them may be different, and we certainly work with every agency. Our basic information is just a social history on the youth, what is their current situation, and what's their emancipation and transition plan. The services that we're offering to every youth in independent living is obviously life skills is the majority of what we're doing. 9 times out of 10, they're not really ready to be here, and that's okay because we're here to teach them. So I think there's sort of a misnomer of youth need to be ready for independent living, and we always ask, well, what is that? Because they really need the time to learn to be ready to be out on their own, and that's what we're here to do to support them through that. We do formal treatment plans on every youth that's in our program that is going to address those mental health needs as well as their life skills training. What clinical services are we going to provide? We do provide community psychiatric support treatment, which is CPST. Basically, that is interventions that the social worker will work with the youth on to decrease any of those barriers that they may be having to their success. We do diagnostic assessments as well as med-somatic services are within Lighthouse Youth Services. And then we're also working with their treatment team on any transition planning and treatment services. Our housing model is basically around 2 different types of housing. I mentioned to you a level of care, which was special needs or not. And typically, most of our youth are in what we call scattered site housing, which are simply apartments that we rent around the community on behalf of the youth. Lighthouse does hold the lease on those units. And we hope that the youth will be financially able to assume that lease upon their emancipation from the program. The rent is completely paid by Lighthouse. It's furnished by Lighthouse, and they have all of the basic supplies that they need, and they do maintain all of that, everything in the apartment when they successfully complete the program. The other option for youth who do need a little bit more supervision or are considered special needs are our supervised buildings. Those are buildings that Lighthouse actually owns. There's typically only 3 to 4 youth in a building, and we employ a resident manager that provides additional supervision and support to the youth. I would say for the most part, those are youth who are coming out of residential services or group homes, and we would just like to see them integrate into the community first and see how they're going to do before we put them in an apartment on their own. So typically they're in a supervised apartment building anywhere from 90 days to 6 months, and we'd like to be able to transition them into scattered site. Lighthouse Youth Services has a variety of programs that help to support youth aging out of the system and transitioning into adulthood. I think the bio that Jen mentioned said 14 programs. We actually have 21 programs right now. And many of them, as we go through these sort of briefly, you can see all touch transition age youth in some way, or certainly can. We provide a self-sufficiency training for Hamilton County through a contract funded by Chafee funds, where we are doing a curriculum for every youth in the county age 16 and up to help prepare them for self-sufficiency. What I consider that is sort of an awareness training for those youth. Because they start at age 16, sometimes even 15, they don't have an opportunity sometimes for 2 years or more to sort of operationalize what they're learning in that training. So it brings them to an awareness level, and hopefully when they are placed in independent living, all of those issues aren't completely foreign to them. Our Youth Crisis Center is a 24-hour emergency residential facility that offers crisis intervention, respite, and family and individual counseling. It is the only crisis center in our city and has been in existence since 1974. I mentioned our independent living program started in 1981. And then about 3 years ago, we entered into a contract with the Hamilton County Mental Health Board and assisted them with their SAMHSA grant in a program called Journey to Successful Living. That program is focusing on building a system of care for youth ages 14 to 21. And the goal is to help youth who have mental health diagnoses. And when we say multi-system care, that may be the criminal justice system. It may be they needed assistance in several educational systems, to wrap services around those youth and teach them to transition successfully into adulthood. Those youth may not be in custody or ever have been in custody of children's services. What's interesting in that, because of some of the other programs that Lighthouse is involved in, many of those youth are also in those other programs, particularly in our home-based service division, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. Our Emancipated Youth Program is also funded by Chafee funds through the Hamilton County Jobs and Family Services. It is for youth who have emancipated from care and who may find themselves homeless after emancipation. One of the things that we do not do, at least in Hamilton County, is discharge any youth to homelessness. However, unfortunately, we do find that youth do end up homeless after having had whatever issues happen to them when they no longer had the support they needed. So we inform every youth of this option through Hamilton County to come back and essentially have the same services they have had in the independent living program, except now we're focusing on what were those barriers, what happened when you were out there that got you back in this situation, and build their skills again so that they can be successful. Our Civic Justice Corps program is funded by the Department of Labor, and it is for males ages 18 to 22 who are adjudicated through the juvenile justice system and again are reintegrating into the community. Community management of transitional services specifically for sex offenders, and it is started in 2007 and funded by purchase of service contracts through the state and our county. Our home-based service division offers multiple different programs and services. One of them is an in-home program and wraparound services where we are working with children and families actually to keep them out of the child welfare system. Sorry about that. So the goal is to stabilize these families and youth in their households so that they don't end up being in custody of children's services. And there are actually more therapists and case managers than are listed here. There's actually, I think, about 150 therapists and case managers now. And that program is funded primarily by Medicaid. We also replicated a program called Work Appreciation for Youth, but however, it is now funded totally by Medicaid and is a case management program to serve youth and help them with employability skills. The Lighthouse Shakely Center for Youth has just been open about a year and a half. It is the only 28-bed shelter for youth in Cincinnati that serves 18 to 24-year-olds. And it is funded by HUD Foundation, city funds, and private donations. We also have a youth outreach program that is actually serving youth who are still on the streets and who may be homeless or at risk of homelessness, to help give them the information and education that they need about services so that they can find stable housing and also receive case management services to increase their education and employability skills, and also just to keep them safe. We are also a part of the Higher Education Mentoring Initiative, which is a partnership between University of Cincinnati, Hamilton County Jobs and Family Services, as well as Lighthouse. And Lighthouse is actually providing housing services for those youth who are emancipating from the child welfare system and attending higher education and need assistance with housing. Our Transitional Living Program is housing and support for homeless adults 18 to 21. So there are many youth who are in our Shakely Center for Youth who become homeless, and then we are able to transition them into stable housing through our Transitional Living Program. That is funded by a variety of different grants as well as HUD funding to help those youth become self-sufficient and have permanent housing. Permanent housing is actually the next one, sort of a part of the Transitional Living Program. It's just a different funding source, but the same clients are served with the same purpose. I just wanted to go through pretty quickly where we are today in terms of what's happening with these transition age youth. And obviously we have youth in their 20s and 30s that are still at home more than we have in the past. Total independence is now at about age 28, and actually I think that's a little older now. I always say, good grief, my own kids will be about 40 by the time they leave. 60% of college seniors are planning on moving back home after graduation just because of the job market and being able to find jobs. Youth employment rates are still low, and most entry-level jobs and minimum wage jobs will not sustain independent housing and pay for all the associated costs related to having their own apartment. There's also the issue of health insurance not being offered in entry-level positions. Subsidized housing is very limited, and certainly in our area there are times when the lists are completely closed and they aren't even an option. The other thing that we have seen happen in the last 2 years is that now there does have to be some income in order for a young person to qualify for subsidized housing. So youth could in the past not have employment, and I think they just figured they would be able to come up somehow with the $25, $30 to rent. Now they actually have to be able to prove income either through SSI or through employment in order to even receive subsidized housing. So that becomes another barrier, particularly for transition age youth. Just gas prices and bus fare across society is causing problems for our youth. When you think about youth who have supportive services through their families and how much they are still getting from those families and assistance every year, youth aging out of the child welfare system don't have anybody to fall back on to even get that amount of support. So they are at that much of a disadvantage in being able to remain self-sufficient. Many of the services are discharging youth at 18 years old. However, I did mention in Hamilton County we're seeing them stay longer, and that's really great for our youth. We do have core services that we offer in our independent living program, and this is sort of just the core services we offer to every youth, and then in addition to that, we certainly individualize services and focus more on one or more services that youth may need assistance with. So every youth has an intake and orientation where they're simply just given the rules of the road of the program, what the expectations are. Most of them look at us with a deer in headlights. I think it's really interesting. Most of them have lived the majority of their lives waiting to get to independent living, and then start hearing about, I'm going to live in my own apartment, I've got to learn to budget, I've got to learn to manage the friends and the family in my apartment, and it really is overwhelming. So it's not exactly the pipe dream that they see happen, that they thought was going to happen when they come into the program. I mentioned we're providing all the housing and furnishings for the youth, as well as basic supplies. We do provide a weekly stipend for each youth and put a portion of that in savings for them. As youth begin to become employed, we work with every youth individually on what exactly do you need in terms of a cash flow every week, and we put as much money in savings for them as we can. Most of our youth leave with an average of about $2,500 from their savings account. Every youth is assigned a licensed social worker, and we see them a minimum of twice a week for most youth to provide that life skills training and support that they need. Special needs are addressed, as I mentioned. We're doing life skills planning with every youth, and that face-to-face contact is critical. That does occur weekly, twice a week. However, there are multiple phone calls that are also occurring during the week with each youth. We do see the youth in their apartments every week, and that is critical because we need to help them manage that apartment and learn how to live within a community and tenants next to them, and understanding what it is to be a respectful tenant with other people living next door to you, and also learning to deal with their issues, because some of them may be doing things that the youth don't like, and how to address those issues and become advocates for themselves. We always are focusing on education and or employment or vocational support. So every youth in our program must be working and or going to school. If a youth is still in high school and we're focusing on graduating and that youth is really, really pushing and doesn't need any other distractions, we are okay with them not working until they graduate, because obviously they will be have better employability if they do reach that high school diploma or GED. We are working with them on what are their social supports, trying to make sure that every single youth has a supportive adult in their life, whether that is a mentor, a family member that we pull in. Sometimes it has been supportive boyfriends or girlfriends or other partners that the youth may have that they've had long-term relationships with and can be a good benefit for them. There's always a treatment team involved with every youth, and we are meeting with that team at least on a monthly basis. Counseling services are provided within Lighthouse Youth Services through our home-based services, and we are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We do have a rotating on-call system through our staff to make sure that youth can always reach somebody. Our discharge planning and aftercare services really do begin with that intake process. How long is that youth going to be here? What are those things we really need to work on and focus on so that that youth can be successful when they leave? Just briefly, I wanted to just take a look at some formal tools that we do use. There's the Casey Life Skills Assessment and also the Daniel Memorial Assessment. In Hamilton County, every youth receives the Daniel Memorial Assessment through Hamilton County Jobs and Family Services. We also do a life skills assessment with the Casey Life Skills Assessment when the youth comes into the program. However, I believe probably within the next 6 months, the county is going to standardize, and every provider will use the Daniel Memorial, just so that we have consistency across our county and how our youth are functioning. And then we're also looking at all of the different life skills domains, such as career planning, communication, their home life, budgeting, self-care and safety, social relationships, work life, as well as education and study skills. And then again, I mentioned that every youth has a training plan, and those are those life skills domains that I mentioned. And that actually concludes my portion of our presentation. And I thank you very much. I know we're going to have questions here in a minute, and there's also contact information for myself and Bob.
Thank you, Benita.
And I will turn. You're welcome.
It doesn't look like we have any questions at this time, so we will turn the time over to Bob Meekum. Thank you for being here, Bob.
Thank you. Happy to be here. We wanted to talk a bit about the experience that we had with an organization in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, called Vision Quest, and the work that we have done with Vision Quest has now taken place over a 5-year period. We began the work with Vision Quest when we had received a contact from Chapin Hall, the research wing of the University of Chicago in the area of child welfare, asking if Lighthouse would be willing to participate in a random controlled trial of the Lighthouse Independent Living model here in Hamilton County, Ohio. We were really interested in doing that because this request was a part of a national evaluation of the Chafee Act, and because of the length of time we've been doing independent living in Cincinnati and some of the positive outcomes we've had, the Chapin Hall and their research partner, the Urban Institute, were really interested in Lighthouse doing this random controlled trial. However, we couldn't do it because we, at the time, were the only agency in Cincinnati that was providing this service, and we simply couldn't randomly assign half of our referrals into a control group who would not receive the service. So after initially having to turn down that opportunity, we met the CEO of Vision Quest, and over time began to think that perhaps we could prepare another agency in a different state to execute the Lighthouse Independent Living model with a sufficient degree of fidelity that we could use a second site, Philadelphia, a much larger city with several other independent living programs already in existence, to be the site for this random controlled trial. In fact, the Urban Institute and Chapin Hall and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services were very enthusiastic about that potential. So we began working with Vision Quest about 5 years ago to help them learn how to do the Lighthouse Independent Living model so that they could get up to a sufficient a number of youth in the program with a sufficient degree of fidelity to the Lighthouse model that it would become perhaps the place where the trial could take place to help with the overall evaluation of a housing model. So here's what we've learned. The first is that we were successful in the application of the replication project. Vision Quest has now served over 400 young people. In fact, even today, there, I believe, are 65 to 70 young people in the Vision Quest Independent Living Program. The local child welfare system had a lot of learnings to understand how to work with Vision Quest And when we first began the replication project, we spent a fair amount of time working with the child welfare system in Philadelphia and with the juvenile court and the juvenile court system of placement, so that the two major referring public agencies, the Philadelphia Juvenile Court and the Philadelphia Children's Services Department, would fully understand what this independent living program was attempting to accomplish, why we were approaching independent living in the way that we were, so that our friends at Vision Quest would have an opportunity to really roll this out. So we worked with Vision Quest to develop a job description for their staff and help them vet their first program director. And right away, we recognized that, particularly in Philadelphia, that there were different expectations between the juvenile court and the Philadelphia Children's Services Department in terms of what they felt their young people needed, in terms of the amount of time that they could spend, the kinds of issues that Vision Quest needed to deal with. And it was a real significant learning experience for Lighthouse, Vision Quest, as well as the court and Philadelphia Children's Services, to help us ferret out some of the expectations that were somewhat unique to each of those public agencies. One of the other things that was somewhat of a challenge was the rather predictable high level of staff turnover in the first year. When we began work with the staff in Philadelphia, all of them came to Cincinnati and spent almost a week on-site learning how we do the independent living program here in Cincinnati. And of course, as these things always go, in the first year there was enough staff turnover that there were some significant travel costs and training costs involved in bringing in the new staff to Cincinnati, or us going to Philadelphia to train the new staff. That's not at all unusual in the startup of any program, but it certainly was an issue that we had to help Vision Quest work through. One of the other things that we learned was that real estate costs in Philadelphia, as certainly is a case in most of the East Coast and West Coast cities, are substantially higher than they are here in the Midwest. So that the costs of real estate, the availability of apartment units at prices that Vision Quest could afford within the financial arrangements that we had, was a significant challenge for us to face, and resulted in some program modifications that had to take place, where we were doubling up some kids in 2- and 3-bedroom apartments, as opposed to the practice that we had always used in Cincinnati of having only one youth in one apartment. We developed a case management tool that has been employed by Lighthouse for many years, and we found that working from the same case management tool really helped everybody get on the same page in terms of the process that the staff in Philadelphia were following and its fidelity to the model. It was altogether a very productive and I think outstanding learning experience, both for the staff members at Vision Quest and the staff members at Lighthouse, as we learned the nuances of training a group of staff members in a program hundreds of miles away, and a lot of airline tickets for both agencies to come here to Cincinnati for training and to Philly for monitoring and support for them. I'm very pleased to say that after 5 years of working together, the agencies both agreed that Vision Quest is ready to become a potential site for the random control trial. There's still some work to be done in terms of fidelity, but there are some potential research partners in the city of Philadelphia that we think can help Vision Quest move toward what was our mutual goal of becoming a site where a random control trial could take place. So with that, I think I can close my comments and open the door for any comments or questions from our participants.
Thank you, Bob. It looks like we just have one question at this time. Someone would like to know, are there any other replications?
Are there any? I didn't hear the end of your question.
If there are any other replications?
Are there any other replication programs going now? No, there are not, at least not on the scale of the replication with Vision Quest. But we are, certainly open to the opportunity to help support other organizations around the country who may have an interest in doing so, certainly.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. It looks like we don't have any other questions at this time. I would like to launch a quick poll. So if everyone wants to take a look at that, and I'll give you a few seconds to reply. And here's another. We've got two more. And just one more polling question there on your screen. Thank you so much, Bob and Benita. Do you have any thoughts to add?
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this. Best wishes to you, my friend Dr. Greenwood. It's good to share some time with you as well.
Thank you very much. I don't have any questions.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us today. If you'd like what you heard today and you'd like to share this information, you can visit our website in the next few weeks where you can find a recorded version of today's webinar. Make sure to join us on September 20th for our webinar on brief strategic family therapy presented by Ruben Roberts. Thank you and have a great day.